Hey everyone, welcome back to Alfred's Basic Adult Piano Course Greatest Hits Level 1. This video is Lesson 4. So we're going to cover page 6 and 7 in our book today, Puff the Magic Dragon. And what I want to do is basically just start with our right hand and just kind of play through that note for note, and also looking at the fingering from the beginning to the end of the piece. So even though I'm going to focus on notes, notice we're in 4/4 time, so 4 beats per measure. And I may mention some of the rhythms here or there, but mostly I'm just going to focus on our notes. Now you'll notice right off the bat that we're not in the C position. So the right hand C position is C, D, E, F, and G, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So that puts our fourth finger on F. But our first note is a G. So they've got our fourth finger on G. There's probably a reason for that. And you may not even see it until the second line. I see it, and it's actually all the way in measure 8. But let's go through this, and you'll see exactly why you have 4 on G. So that is our first note. That is also the next 3 notes in the measure. We'll get to the rhythms in just a little bit. The next measure, 3 on F sharp, and you're going to have your thumb on D. The next measure is 2 on E, back to 4 on G twice. And our last measure, thumb on D. And on beat 4, a D again. Measure 5, you've got a half rest. So you're going to rest on beats 1 and 2, and the D again on beat 3. Rest on beat 4, and the next measure, rest on beat 1, D again, up to G, fourth finger, 2 more Gs, and the next measure, yet again, another G, and then you have 2 on E, 3 on F sharp, 4 on G, and last measure, we have a 5 on A. And that's kind of what it came down to. So you never played below a D, so that's why your thumb, your lowest finger, can be on a D. But you do need to get up to the A, so that's why we started the song with 4 on G, to make that 5th finger be available for A. Now, going on, measure 9. We're pretty much, a lot of this is very repetitious. You got a lot of Gs here. So once again, measure 9, G, 4th finger. You got 3 more Gs. F sharp, 3rd finger, down to D with your thumb. Next measure, E, 2nd finger, played twice, back up to G with your 4th finger, twice, and last measure on that line, down to D with your thumb. And again on beat 4. Measure 13, half rest for 2 counts, D again on beat 3. Rest on beat 4, next measure, rest on beat 1, D again. On beat 2, up to G, 4th finger, twice. Next measure, 2 on E, 4 on G, 3 on F sharp, 5 on A, and last measure, 4 on G, down to your thumb on D. So at this point, on all of page 6, your right hand position was really this. So I think I've used this term before, even though it's not a real thing. One could call this the D major position. D, E, F sharp, G, and A. Those are all the notes you're playing in the right hand. You're not going above or below any of those notes. So that is your locked hand position, or I should say assigned fingering, if you will, for the entirety of page 6. Looking ahead, it looks like it's going to be the same for page 7. This song is very repetitious, I'm starting to realize. So page 7, measure 17. Let's continue. 4 on G. Next measure, 3 on F sharp, down to D. Next measure, E, G, G. And last measure, D. D again. Next line, half rest, once again for 2 counts, D on beat 3. Rest on 4. Next measure, rest on 1, D, up to G. Next measure, G again. E, F sharp, G, A. Measure 25, the third line, back to our G's. F sharp, down to D. E. G, G, and D. D again. Next measure, half rest for 2 counts. D on beat 3. Quarter rest on beat 4. Measure 30, bottom line. Quarter rest on beat 1. Followed by a D. 3 G's. Down to E. Up to G. F sharp. Up to A. And back to G. So I realized that the entire piece, your right hand is only playing these 5 notes with those 5 fingers. So you can assign those 5 fingers to those 5 notes throughout the entire piece. Keep in mind, all Fs are sharp. There's not an F natural. So your third finger will always be on the F sharp. I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of repetition. Look at the top line on page 6. Look at the top line on page 7. The exact same thing. Look at the second line on page 6 and the second line on page 7. Exact same thing. The third line on page 6 and the third line on page 7 are pretty much the same. Measures 9 and 25 are the same. Measures 10 and 26 are the same. Measures 11 and 27 are pretty much the same. The only difference is in measure 27, the E is a half note rather than 2 quarter notes. But same note, same fingering. And you're going to find that there's a lot of that repetition. So as you play through the entire piece, you're actually practicing some of these sections multiple times. So normally I say, don't always run through an entire piece, because you want to take smaller sections and repeat those more and more and have that focused practice. But you're actually kind of doing that with this piece. So running through the whole piece, maybe not that bad of an idea. All right, sticking with the right hand, let's look at rhythm. So we said 4 beats per measure. Now there are 8th notes. There's not many, but if there are 8th notes, you're going to want to count 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and for precision. And you're going to have to do that even when you get to the long whole notes. Otherwise, you risk rushing the whole notes. The very first measure is a rhythm that we see a couple times. So that very first measure, you have a dotted quarter note, 1.5 beats. So you would count that 1 and 2, followed by an 8th note. And that 8th note is on and. And then the last 2 quarter notes are going to be 3 and 4 and. So that first measure, it's all G's, so it's just a matter of playing those G's at the proper rhythms. So it's going to go like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now you might have to do it slower. Maybe you can do it faster. A little bit faster would sound like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. The tune is moderately fast, so it's going to eventually go. And that's probably what sounds recognizable to everyone if you know this tune. However, when you're learning, even if it's a recognizable tune, don't be tempted to go too fast too soon. You may not end up playing the exact notes or even the exact rhythms. And it's those rhythms sometimes where people kind of get confused on. They play what they think they hear and not exactly what's on the page. So you might have to slow this down at first and eventually speed it up. Now, what's important about that first measure is that you keep, like I said earlier, you keep that consistent counting when you get into the second measure. Because I could easily rush those half notes. So measures 1 and 2 need to go like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Yeah, it's tedious, but it works and it's precise, okay? The next several measures are pretty basic. I'll run through them anyways. Let me start at the beginning again. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 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 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. So measures 5 and 6, two things. Measure 5, you got all those rests. You're resting in the right hand on beat 1 and 2, also on beat 4. Now, when you put the hands together, your left hand's actually playing in those spots, so you're not going to have complete silence. Your left hand will actually fill the gaps. So actually, it'll be a little bit easier when you add the left hand. But for now, still be able to do it precise when you're doing the right hand by itself. Now, measure 6, we got 2 more eighth notes on 4 and. So be careful on those last 2 G's. That's 4 and. Don't let that sneak up on you. When you get to measure 8, the end of the second line, 1, 2, 3, 4. See what I did there? It's got to be 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. If I take those ands out because I got impatient, I'm going to rush it. And it's just not going to have that musical flow once you put it all together. So, again, tedious, but accurate. Measure 9 is the same rhythm as measure 1. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. At this point, we're pretty much repeating everything we did on the first line. Measure 11, though, you have 2 E's, 2 quarter note E's. 1 and 2 and. Whereas in measure 3 at the top, it was just a half note. But other than that, you're pretty much repeating the same material. Going over to page 7. Measure 17, same thing as the very beginning. So you do that rhythm enough, eventually you're not going to have to count it. But you got to count it in the beginning to make sure you do have the precision of it, the accuracy. And like we said earlier, a lot of page 7, if not almost all of it, is a repeat of page 6. Although when you get to the very ending, that's different. So going down to measure 30, I'm going to start there at measure 30. So make sure your thumb is on D as we start here. So quarter rest on beat 1. So that's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 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 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. You're off on beat 4 there with that quarter rest, but that tie is a total of 7 counts. So it's long, but that pretty much covers your right hand. Now you notice the right hand has slurs, everything. So you want a very smooth melody, and most of our melody is in the right hand. Some of it's in the left hand, but almost all of it is in the right hand. Let's look at our left hand now. So the left hand is going to be in the G position, and as I'm looking ahead, that will not change for the entire piece. The G position right here, putting 5 on G, 4 on A, 3 on B, 2 on middle C, and your thumb on D. The first measure, your first 2 notes are G and E. G and B. With your 5th and 3rd finger, the whole measure, a whole note. Now in the next measure, just simply play the B by itself. Next measure, middle C, which is your 2nd finger, and the last measure back to B for 3 counts because you're going to rest on beat 4. Now in measure 5, these notes in measure 5 and 6 are actually part of the melody. How do we know this? Because if you look at the words attached to the notes, the right hand is resting during some of those words. So the words frolicked, the only notes you're playing are in the left hand, so that has to be melody on beats 1 and 2. Resting on beat 3, but the right hand plays that D, which is melody, and then back to melody in the left hand on beat 4 for the word the. And then the next measure, this B on the word awe of autumn. Then the right hand continues your melody. So in measure 6, you're going to rest for the rest of that measure. In measure 7, 4th finger on A for 2 beats, up to the C sharp for 2 beats. And in measure 8, this is a little walk down here. D, C, B, A. Keep in mind, you just hit a C sharp in measure 7, but measure 8 is a different measure. So when you hit the C, make sure it's a C natural. Measure 9 is just like the beginning. G and B with 5 and 3. Measure 10, just the B. Measure 11, middle C. Measure 12, back to B. Down at measure 13, it's just like the second line. with some differences here. So the brought him, that's melody. Then you rest, and the word and, seal, those are melody also. The right hand carries the melody for the rest of the line. Your left hand comes in again on measure 15, middle C for 2 counts. And this is where it's a little bit different than the second line. D with your thumb. And you're going to go back to G and B, 5 and 3, just for 1 beat. You're going to rest on beats 2, 3, and 4. Stay right there because at the top of page 7, you're playing that G and B again. And it's just like the first page. 3 on B, 2 on C, back to 3 on B, rest on beat 4. Here's some melody in our left hand. C, C, rest, C, and B. Skipping over to measure 23, A, up to C sharp, and here's that walk down, D, C, B, A, and G and B at measure 25, and then just B, and C, and back to B. And here's the last time you're going to do some melody notes in the left hand, and then you rest, another C down to B, resting on beats 2, 3, and 4, and then our ending's a little bit different. Measure 31, 2 on C down to 5 on G. Do it again on beat 3 and again on beat 4. Next measure, a little higher, D to A. So that's 1 and 4. Last 2 measures, you're going to rest for 2 counts, come in on G with your 5th finger, and the last 2 notes are B and D. 3 on B and the thumb on D. So measures 31 and 32, you've got this little back and forth pattern. So measure 31, it's C and G, 2 and 5. Repeat it. And then 1 and 4 on D and A. All right, so since the left hand's not quite as busy as the right hand, I'm going to go ahead and put both hands together. But if I get to a tricky spot, I'll stop and just dissect it a little bit. Now, here's the interesting thing. When you begin the piece, remember, G position, left hand. We said we could call this the D position, the right hand. What this does is it puts both of our thumbs on D. All right, we've seen this in some other positions, such as the middle C position. You're going to basically keep your thumb out of the way in the left hand, at least for now, because your right hand's going to be playing those Ds initially. So your thumb in the right hand's going to be probably a little bit above the thumb in the right hand. Make sure you've got your 5th and 3rd finger on G and B in the left hand. Make sure you got your 4 on G, and you're going to play all of those together at the very beginning. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And so obviously every time your left hand plays something different, that's where it's going to get challenging, because your right hand is also going to be playing with it, a different note. So between measures 1 and 2, that transition is probably going to be hard. So, if it is, just practice measures 1 and 2 several times. You can even go from the last thing you play on beat 4 in measure 1 to the first thing you play on beat 1 in measure 2. And just study where's the connection in both of these hands. What's happening in the right hand? I'm just going down from G to F sharp. What's happening in the left hand? I'm going from G and B to only B. Okay, so then put it together. Notice F sharp and B are with 3rd fingers, so you've got the same finger in both hands playing the same note, so I like that. Sometimes recognizing that helps. So find connections to bring the hands together. Going on. Measure 3, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And remember to rest in the left hand. Don't hang on to that B in beat 4. Now measure 5. Be very specific here because this is all melody notes. Only play the notes in the left hand. Do not be holding this D in the right hand. So measure 5, we've got C, C, switch to D in the right hand, back to C. Now, what if you hit that D on beat 3 with your left hand? So that's not what the music says. However, the results are the same, or maybe better. Maybe some of you are saying, hey, why don't I just hit that D in the left hand right there instead of going back and forth in the same measure? Well, you're right. You could actually do that. The only thing I want to make sure of is that you do that on purpose. So understand that this is what's written and say, okay, I understand that. I know how to do that, but I'm going to do this because it's actually easier and smoother. And I tend to agree. So if you want to do that, go for it. If you want that D to be played with your left hand, why not? So let me do that and then I'll keep going. And our next measure. Now do go back to D in your right hand here. Make sure to rest on beats 2, 3, and 4 in your left hand. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and here's our walk down. Now it's so easy when you have these little walk downs to just go. Don't speed it up. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Because when I'm playing this piece up to tempo, what if I did this? You might be like, oh, that sounded cool. Trust me, it's not. Because someone listening to that song is going to be like, why'd you rush it? I was in the zone there. I was all chill and relaxed, and you just took me out of it. So, yeah, make sure you're counting the 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and in places like that. Going on to measure 9, it's like the beginning. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. A little different down here now in measure 15. 2, 3, and 4, and. So the last measure, the rest in the left hand. So I'm very particular about rests because there's a reason for it. Sometimes it lets the music breathe. Sometimes a rest may be to actually help you get to the next notes easier. Sometimes it just gives the melody a chance to shine. In this case, it's doing that. You're actually playing the word O all by itself. So. But they actually want you to come off of the word stuff early in the left hand. So you're holding stuff for 2 counts, that G, I should say, in the right hand for 2 counts, but your left hand is only 1 count. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and in the top of 7, it's like the beginning again. So the last line's a little bit different too. Back at measure 30, we've got left hand on B, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 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 1 and 2 and 3 and an off on 4. So at the very last 2 measures in the left hand, make sure you got that half rest before you come in onto G. It's a little bit busier in measures 31 and 32. Remember, you got this back and forth in the left hand, which is easy to do by itself, but when you pair it up with all these notes in the right hand, it's a little more difficult. So you may have to really break this down. So I wouldn't go any further than say beat 3 of measure 31 if this is a challenge. Repetition will help you get it. Once you get it, then go on. Maybe you're hesitant into measure 32. So always make sure you got your notes lined up with the right fingering before you play it. Thumb on D, 2 on F sharp, and then together. Now, if you're hesitant, you're taking that much time, go back and do it again. And once you feel good, go on a little bit further. Maybe you're hesitant here, D and the A. And that goes for the entire piece and really any piece of music. If there's hesitancy, there's a system I like. Make sure you got the notes first. Make sure you got the fingering also with those notes. When you start to add rhythm, go very, very, very slow counting. But if you're not consistent with your rhythm, if you're not steady, that means you still don't know the notes well enough. So you got to get to that point where you can almost anticipate the next note. And that's why we practice, and that's why repetition. Because even though you're reading music, you're still memorizing this to a certain degree. You play it so many times that you hear the next note, you feel the next note. So you want to get to that point where you're not trying to read what is that next note, because if you do that, there's no ability to have a steady playing anymore. You're going to have hesitancy, and the music has to have flow. So anywhere where there's hesitancy, just focus and zone in on that little section and back and forth, where you're coming from and where you're going to. Hands separate, you're probably going to get it in no time. Hands together, you're going to be like, this is hard, let me go back. If your hands are fine separate, there's no going back to doing that. The more you do hands separate, it's not going to help you at that point. But if you can't do hands separate, you definitely can't do them together, okay? So once you feel like your hands are good enough individually, put them together, stick with it. Stick with it. All right, so I hope you enjoy this tune. And again, any questions, comments, leave them down in the section below. And look forward to seeing you in the next lesson.